My beloved child, stop scrolling and remain here for a moment, because what you are about to hear carries the echo of a conversation you were never supposed to know about. Something happened around a table where your name was spoken, your heart was questioned, and your place in someone's life was treated as though it could be debated. But before that evening ended, the person connected to your soul did something no one expected. They pushed back their chair, stood before everyone, and made the entire room fall silent. You may not understand why these words found you now, but heaven has allowed this message to reach you because you have been wondering whether anyone truly sees the depth of what you carry. You have asked yourself in quiet moments whether your love was ever recognized, whether your loyalty was ever understood, and whether the person you cannot easily forget has ever defended you when you were not present. You have felt the weight of unanswered questions. You have sensed a shift without knowing where it began. And lately, your spirit has been picking up on something your eyes have not yet witnessed. Do not move away from this message. There is a reason your heart reacted before the story was even revealed. There is a reason one particular face entered your mind. There is a reason the silence around this connection has suddenly begun to feel different. What happened at that table did not begin with a declaration. It began with a question, one that sounded ordinary on the surface but carried an intention beneath it. The evening had been moving normally. Voices overlapped. Glasses touched the table. Someone laughed too loudly. Another person changed the subject whenever the conversation became too serious. Your soulmate was there physically, but their thoughts had already wandered somewhere else. They were listening, yet not fully present. A part of them was thinking about you. They had tried not to. They had told themselves they would enjoy the evening without allowing your memory to enter every quiet space. They had promised themselves they would not check their phone repeatedly. They had decided they would not wonder what you were doing, whether you were smiling, whether someone else was receiving the attention they secretly wished belonged to them. But the heart does not always obey the rules the mind creates. Your presence followed them into that room. Not as a burden. Not as regret. As a truth they had delayed admitting. Someone at the table noticed their distraction. At first, it came as a teasing remark. A playful question. A sentence designed to make others laugh. Who are you thinking about? Your soulmate looked down for a moment. They smiled, but it was not the kind of smile that comes from amusement. It was the smile of someone whose secret had been touched unexpectedly. Their expression changed quickly, but not quickly enough. Someone saw it. Then another voice joined in. And another. The conversation shifted. What had been harmless curiosity began circling closer to your name. My child, there are moments when people reveal their true intentions through the questions they ask. Some ask because they care. Some ask because they are curious. Some ask because they already know the answer and want to see whether someone has the courage to speak it aloud. Around that table, there were all three kinds of people. Your soulmate tried to remain calm. They answered carefully. They spoke around the truth without touching its center. They said there was someone they respected. Someone they could not stop thinking about. Someone who had changed the way they viewed love, loyalty, timing, and destiny. No name was spoken at first. But everyone knew. The room carried that strange energy that appears when an unspoken truth becomes visible. Eyes moved from one person to another. Someone leaned forward. Someone else looked away. A person sitting near the end of the table became noticeably uncomfortable because your name had already entered their mind, and they did not want the conversation to go further. That person had an opinion about you. An opinion they had never shared directly with your soulmate. Until that night. You need to hear this carefully because the next few moments changed something. The person cleared their throat and spoke in a tone that pretended to be casual. Are you still thinking about them? Your soulmate's eyes lifted. The question was simple, but something beneath it felt disrespectful. It was not the words alone. It was the way they were spoken, as though caring about you was something embarrassing, something your soulmate should have outgrown, something that needed to be explained. Your soulmate paused. Everyone waited. They could have laughed it off. They could have changed the subject. They could have protected themselves from vulnerability by pretending you no longer mattered. But they did not. They answered quietly. Yes. One word. Yet that one word shifted the atmosphere. The laughter stopped. Someone looked surprised. Someone else smiled as though they had been waiting for honesty. But the uncomfortable person was not satisfied. They leaned back and asked another question. Why? My beloved child, that question awakened something in your soulmate. Not anger at first. Clarity. Because for weeks, perhaps months, they had been carrying feelings without putting them into complete sentences. They knew they missed you. They knew your absence felt louder than other people's presence. They knew they compared every conversation to the ease they once felt with you. They knew there were things they wished they had said differently, moments they wished they could revisit, and misunderstandings they wished they had handled with greater courage. But until that question was asked, they had not fully explained to themselves why you remained so deeply within them. Why? The word continued echoing. Why did your name still affect them? Why did they still remember small details about you? Why did they notice when someone used a phrase you used to say? Why did certain songs feel unfinished without you? Why did they feel unsettled whenever they imagined you building a future with someone else? Why had time not erased what everyone assumed time would erase? Their face became serious. They looked around the table slowly. And for the first time that evening, everyone saw that this was not a passing attraction. This was not entertainment. This was not a story your soulmate could summarize with a careless sentence and move on from. They spoke your name. The moment they did, something in the room changed. You were not there physically, yet your presence became undeniable. Some people remembered meeting you. Others remembered stories about you. One person remembered the way your soulmate's voice changed whenever they spoke about you. Another person recalled how different your soulmate had seemed during the time you were close. Your name opened a door. And once it opened, every hidden opinion began moving toward the surface. One person said you had always seemed kind. Another said they had never seen your soulmate so emotionally invested in anyone. Someone else admitted that they believed the connection between you was never truly finished. Your soulmate listened without interrupting. Part of them was surprised. They had assumed no one noticed. They had thought they concealed how deeply you affected them. But the people around the table had seen more than they realized. Then the uncomfortable person spoke again. This time, their words were sharper. They said your soulmate was holding on to an idea, not a person. They suggested that memories had made you seem more perfect than you were. They implied that if you truly cared, the distance or silence between you would never have happened. The room became quieter. Your soulmate did not answer immediately. Not because they agreed. Because they were trying to remain composed. My child, you must understand something important. Your soulmate has heard people speak carelessly before. They have allowed comments to pass because confrontation felt unnecessary. They have remained silent to preserve peace. They have swallowed responses because they did not want others to see how emotionally exposed they felt. But that night, silence began to feel like betrayal. Not betrayal of you alone. Betrayal of what they knew. The person continued. They questioned your intentions. They questioned your loyalty. They questioned whether you had ever felt the same depth your soulmate felt. They spoke as though they understood your heart from a distance, as though they had been present during your private moments, as though they knew what you endured silently. Your soulmate's hand tightened beneath the table. No one noticed at first. But heaven did. Every emotion they had hidden began rising at once. They remembered the moments you showed up when you could have walked away. They remembered the way you listened when others only waited for their turn to speak. They remembered how you carried your own pain while still trying to protect theirs. They remembered your patience. Your restraint. Your quiet strength. They remembered the parts of you that no one at that table had earned the right to judge. Still, they remained seated. Still, they tried to breathe. Still, they hoped the conversation would stop before they were forced to reveal everything they had kept hidden. But the person leaned forward and said something that crossed a line. They said, maybe they were never the person you thought they were. The words fell heavily. And the entire table sensed it. Your soulmate looked up. Their expression changed. The softness disappeared, but not into rage. It became something stronger, certainty. Someone tried to interrupt. Someone attempted to change the subject. Another person placed a hand near your soulmate's arm as though to quietly advise them not to react. But this moment was no longer under human control. Something your soulmate had avoided acknowledging was about to emerge. They asked one question. What makes you think you know them? The person hesitated. They had not expected resistance. They answered vaguely. They said they had heard things. They had noticed things. They were only trying to protect your soulmate from disappointment. But your soulmate knew there was more. They could hear it in the person's voice. They could feel the hidden motive beneath the concern. Jealousy does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it wears the clothing of advice. Sometimes control speaks in the language of protection. Sometimes a person tries to weaken a connection because they are afraid of what will happen when two people finally stop listening to outside voices. Your soulmate saw it clearly in that moment. Someone had been trying to influence their perception of you. Not only that night. for longer than they realized. Certain doubts had not originated within them. Certain fears had been planted. Certain misunderstandings had been encouraged. Whenever your soulmate began remembering your goodness, someone redirected them toward your flaws. Whenever they considered reaching out, someone reminded them of the risks. Whenever they admitted missing you, someone laughed, dismissed it, or told them they were romanticizing the past. Your soulmate suddenly recognized the pattern. The person at the table had not simply formed an opinion about you. They had been quietly trying to separate your soulmate from the truth of their own heart. That realization struck deeply. Your soulmate leaned back and became silent again, but this silence was different. It was not uncertainty. It was the stillness before a decision. Around the table, people exchanged nervous glances. No one knew what would happen next. But heaven knew. This moment had been building through every night your soulmate lay awake questioning themselves. It had been building through every unsent message. Every time they opened your conversation and closed it. Every time they almost spoke honestly and then allowed fear to take control. They had spent too long permitting other voices to become louder than their own. That night, something broke. Not their heart. The spell of hesitation. Your soulmate looked directly at the person who had questioned you. They began speaking slowly. They said you were not perfect. The table remained still. They said you had made mistakes, and so had they. They said there were misunderstandings between you, moments of distance, words left unsaid, and emotions neither of you handled perfectly. The uncomfortable person gave a faint smile, believing your soulmate was finally agreeing. But the smile disappeared when your soulmate continued. They said your imperfections were never the reason they could not forget you. They said your humanity was part of what made the connection real. They said you never needed to be flawless to be worthy of love. And then they said something no one expected. They saw me when I did not even know how to see myself. My child, those words were not planned. They came from a place deeper than thought. Your soulmate's voice became unsteady, but they did not stop. They spoke about a time when they felt invisible, even among people who claimed to know them. They said you noticed the sadness behind their smile. You recognized their silence. You understood when something was wrong without forcing them to explain everything. They said you did not merely admire the version of them that appeared strong. You cared for the version that was afraid. You saw the hidden wounds. You respected the guarded places. You touched parts of their heart they had kept closed from everyone else. Somebody at the table lowered their eyes. Someone else became emotional. The person who had criticized you tried to respond, but your soulmate raised a hand, not aggressively, but firmly. They were not finished. They said others had judged the connection by what happened publicly, but no one knew the private truth. No one knew what your presence awakened in them. No one knew how many times they had wanted to tell you what you meant. No one knew how deeply they regretted the moments when fear made them appear distant. And then they confessed something even they had never said aloud. They said losing you had not made life easier. It had made everything else feel less real. A chair shifted. Someone inhaled sharply. The person sitting across from your soulmate whispered, Then why haven't you told them? There it was. The question beneath every question. Why had your soulmate remained silent? Why had they allowed time to pass? Why had they listened to fear? Why had they pretended to move forward while their heart remained facing you? Your soulmate looked down. For one brief moment, the courage in their expression faded. You would have recognized what replaced it. Pain. Not the dramatic pain people display for attention. The quiet pain of someone who realizes they may have waited too long. They admitted they were afraid. Afraid you no longer felt the same. Afraid you had misunderstood their silence as rejection. Afraid someone else had arrived and given you the certainty they failed to offer. Afraid that reaching out would confirm the one possibility they could not bear, that your heart had finally closed. My beloved child, your soulmate has imagined that possibility more than once. They have pictured you smiling beside someone else. They have imagined another person becoming familiar with the little things they once treasured about you. They have imagined hearing that you had chosen a future where they no longer belonged. Each time, they tried to tell themselves they would accept it. But their spirit resisted. Because somewhere beneath the fear, they still felt the thread between you. They still sensed unfinished words. They still believed there was something neither distance nor silence had completely erased. At the table, someone asked whether they still loved you. Your soulmate did not answer immediately. They looked around at every face. Some were compassionate. Some curious. One defensive. And one strangely nervous. That nervous person was the one who had been criticizing you. Because they knew the answer could change everything. Your soulmate's eyes filled with emotion, but their voice became steady. They said, "I tried not to." The room remained silent. They continued. They said they had distracted themselves. They had stayed busy. They had accepted invitations they did not want to accept. They had smiled in pictures when they felt empty. They had convinced others they were moving on because they were embarrassed by how deeply your absence affected them. But no matter what they did, something always returned them to you. A memory. A dream. A song. A familiar place. A quiet hour late at night. The feeling of being understood. They said there were moments when they sensed you thinking of them, though they had no proof. Moments when their chest tightened unexpectedly. Moments when they almost heard your voice in their mind. Moments when they felt compelled to reach for their phone. They had dismissed those moments as weakness. But heaven had been using them as reminders. Not promises of a perfect ending. Reminders that truth cannot be permanently silenced. The person who had criticized you interrupted again. They said your soulmate was being emotional. They suggested waiting until the feeling passed. They warned that speaking to you could reopen old wounds. That was when your soulmate realized something else. The person was not afraid that your soulmate would get hurt. They were afraid your soulmate would return to you. My child, you are closer to the center of this revelation now, but do not look away. What happened next was the moment the entire evening turned. Your soulmate asked the person directly, "Why does it bother you so much?" No one moved. The person laughed nervously. They denied being bothered. But your soulmate did not accept the answer. They repeated the question. This time, the person's face changed. Someone at the table looked from one to the other and seemed to understand before the truth was spoken. There was history beneath the tension. A hidden expectation. An unspoken desire. The person criticizing you had hoped that your absence would create an opening. They had believed that if enough doubt was placed between you, your soulmate might eventually stop looking back. They had positioned themselves as a trusted voice. A protector. A constant presence. But their concern was not entirely selfless. Your soulmate saw it. The table saw it. And the person knew the mask had slipped. Still, they attempted one final attack. They said, "Even if you feel this way, what makes you think they would choose you now?" The question struck the deepest fear your soulmate carried. For a second, the room seemed to disappear around them. They saw every delay. Every unsent message. Every opportunity lost. Every moment when pride disguised itself as dignity. They saw the possibility that you had waited, wondered, and finally grown tired. Their eyes closed briefly. And in that moment, something passed through their spirit. Not a guarantee. A command to be honest. They opened their eyes. They placed both hands on the edge of the table. Then they stood. The chair moved backward across the floor, and the sound made every person turn. The entire table fell silent. No one knew whether your soulmate was leaving. No one knew whether they were about to confront the person, confess everything, or retreat before their emotions became too visible. But your soulmate remained standing.